Hello, everybody, and welcome to Level 7. The greatest superhero show in the universe is back with a new season of Invincible, which means Beyond Invincible is back. The after show brought to you by Agents of Fandom. I am your host, TJ, aka Fat Thor, and I am joined by my wonderful co-hosts, Sean Mott and TJ Zwarych. And today we are also joined by a very special guest to open up this season, Tom Drew, artist and editor for The Direct. Tom, how you doing today? Thanks for joining us.
I'm doing good. Yeah, thanks for inviting me on the show. It's nice to be able to make my Agents of Fandom debut, I guess. This is really cool. So, yeah, really excited to talk about these 3 episodes. There's a lot to dig into here. So, yeah, just eager to get into it.
Yeah, we have a lot to get through, but really quickly before we hear from our 2 co-hosts here, I just want to ask you really quick, since it is your first time on the show, what's your kind of relationship with Invincible? Are you a new watcher with the show? Fell in love with the show? Are you familiar with the comics at all?
Yeah, so I actually haven't read the comics at all. My first experience with Invincible was with the Prime Video show. Loved it since season 1. I think it's gone kind of a up and down. I think there's been some highs and lows throughout the seasons, but definitely I think this is one of my favorite superhero shows currently airing at the moment. I think it's so much fun. I do want to read the comic at some point, but also I don't want to spoil myself of what happens for the rest of the show. I know some things that are coming, but so maybe eventually I'll get to the comic at some point. But no, yeah, that's pretty much my experience. Loving the show so far, and yeah, it's just been a lot of fun.
I love it. If you ever need some notes on the comics, just let me know, buddy. Sean, how you doing, my friend? It is so good to see you. For those out there who don't know, me and Sean have been doing this show for the past couple years now. So it's good to see you, man. How are you?
I'm great, man. So happy to be here with my bros, about to talk about the best superhero show on TV. Yes, I will stake that claim here. The best show, superheroes on TV, Invincible. So stoked. Like Tom said, these 3 episodes are so jam-packed with stuff. I'm glad. I know us 3 have seen the first 6 episodes of the season, and I'm so glad I went back and rewatched these first 3. For one, I didn't want to spoil anything, obviously, for the next 3 episodes. And for 2, I wanted to remember kind of what kind of plot points were set up in these 3 and left hanging to pay off later. Because, I mean, obviously, that's a big Invincible thing we see at this point. Mm-hmm. Every plot point comes back worse than ever. And no villain really dies. And yeah, poor Mark. I think that we should just title this it's fuck Beyond Invincible. We should just call us the Poor Mark podcast.
That should be what the whole comic series should be called, honestly, is just Poor Mark. Can the guy get a break? TJ, how you doing, man? Great to see you as well. What's it called? We'll get to your thoughts on the show as well, but also remind the people where they can find us and all the good stuff we have.
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well. I woke up with a bit of a neck kink this morning, so I'm trying to not move too fast or anything like that. Feeling my age a little bit, but other than that, life is really, really good. I finished watching my Daredevil Born Again screeners last night, and I got through the first 4 episodes, and I was like, okay, I think this is an improvement on season 1, but it's just good. It's not great. It's just good. The back half, the last 4 episodes, genuinely, I think might be the best 4 episode stretch of anything Daredevil I've ever seen. Just absolutely incredible. And so can't wait to share that with the world. We're going to be starting our live shows for that next week. In the meantime, my interview with Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio is now up wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe, follow, hit the like button, all that stuff. Got a nice little exclusive from it. Charlie Cox talking about how he's going to be doing another video game. Shout out to the Controller Club podcast with Tom Drew and friends of the show, Lauren Rouse and Kleinfeld. And Charlie Cox is working on another video game after Expedition 33, one he's much more involved in than simply voice acting. So very excited to see what that's going to come out and be. You can find us on socials at Agents Fandom on TikTok and Twitter, Agents of Fandom everywhere else. But good time to be following on YouTube and the podcast feed, because this week we've already talked Paradise. We're talking Invincible today. Comic Corners tomorrow. We got to talk. Is Comic Corner tomorrow?
No, I forgot to talk to you about that before we start recording. No Comic Corner tomorrow, but next week we will be back.
And then maybe we'll actually bump this to tomorrow then, Sean. We'll talk off air as well. But we got to talk about the Spider-Man Brand New Day trailer. And so plan was for that to do it on Friday. Maybe we'll do that tomorrow instead. And then next week is just jam-packed. It's jam-packed. Sunday, Project Hail Mary review. Monday, we're talking Paradise Episode 7. Tuesday, we're talking Daredevil Born Again. Wednesday, we're talking Invincible. Thursday, we got the Comic Corner. And then I'm sure there's going to be some news or trailers, things like that drop over the week. And so Friday we'll probably have something as well. But just nonstop fun content going on right now at Agents of Fandom.
Absolutely jam-packed. Whenever I have to do the outros for Comic Corner, I'm always like, if you're watching anything on TV right now, we most likely have a show for it. Because like there is a show for everything. But getting back
hours ago, Sean just dropped his review for Ready or Not 2. Here I come, up on agentsoffandom.com. We got everything.
Literally everything. And speaking of everything, back to Invincible, because like we said, we have so much to get through today. I'm hoping we can do this in an hour, but we'll see how that turns out. But before getting into the nitty-gritty of things, let's start off with just some spoiler-free reactions. What we thought of this 3-episode premiere as a whole. Tom, as our special guest opening up this season, I'm going to throw it off to you first. What did you think of these first 3 episodes as a whole, and how it is as like an opening for this new season?
Yeah, these 3-episode drops are always interesting because it's like I'm rapidly trying to watch all these episodes before like work starts, and I'm like, oh, there's so much content together, and like you guys are saying, there's so much to kind of absorb with these 3 episodes in particular that I'm like trying to like, okay, this storyline's happening, and now we're going over to this one and this one. But I think this has been a really strong premiere, at least in my opinion. I think like the kind of threads that they've picked up on from the end of season 3 we like pick up pretty soon after the events of season 3. And I think they do a good job of like laying the groundwork. I think of these 3 episodes, 2 is probably my favorite because that's the one where we really dive into the Viltrumite stuff. And like I love all the storylines in the show. I think they do a really good job of fleshing out this world and all the different characters they have. But ultimately, the Viltrumite stuff is probably the thing I'm most engaged with, I guess. So seeing all of that stuff, I think, is just top-notch stuff. But yeah, I think they've done a lot of really interesting stuff across these 3 episodes. They leave some things in places in episode 3, which I'm excited to like see where that kind of leads to. But overall, I think a really strong start for season 4 so far.
I love Nolan and Alan's bromance. That I could have just had all 3 episodes of them going on space adventures. Sean, what did you think of these first 3 episodes? Especially, again, we've done this show for 3 years now. Compared to the other first 3 episode premieres, how did this stack up, you think?
I think it's probably among some of the strongest, maybe since the start. Obviously, the pilot episode is so insane. It's like one of the most insane tonal shifts I've seen in a TV show, maybe ever. But and that's why I always pitch it. I was like, it starts off like a Saturday morning cartoon, and then by the end of the first episode, you're like, what am I watching? Wow. But these first 3 episodes set the tone and set the stage for what this season is. And this show's always been dark, but this season feels so dark and so heavy, and so much is weighing on Mark. And even Nolan, you can see Nolan finally reacting and coming clean to his consequences, everything. But really strong start. Again, I'm glad I rewatched them because the second 3 are so insane that I had to reel it in from these first 3. But it is a very, very good start, and it's cool to see how not just Mark is reacting to everything, but how everyone is reacting to what's happened these first 3 seasons. I think I said it in like my reaction tweet on Monday, but no show handles consequences and choices like this show does. Like, and I mean that amongst everything, like every choice is felt. There's always a reaction to something, and the way they all pile up is so incredible. And I don't even know how they handle it and make it happen and make it make sense. It's truly masterful stuff they do. But Love this show. So stoked. So stoked on the season so far.
TJ, are you going to come in as the dark horse of the group and say you absolutely hated it, or did you also love it? What were your thoughts?
I won't be the dark horse, but I will throw out some complaints before I dive in to the praise. And the complaints actually have nothing to do with the show. I think this was a terrible choice for a release model. I like sometimes when Prime
agree.
Video does, and like sometimes Disney Plus does it. I really don't mind when they do 2 or 3 episodes for a season's release. It didn't need it. It really, really didn't need it for this season. The seasons aren't long enough to warrant that. And 2, we're action-packed straight from the get-go. And like each of these episodes are so good that they warrant a weekly release for people to spend time in talking about it. Especially because, like, we'll talk more about it next week. I think episode 4 is my least favorite of the 6 episodes. Not even, I think, like, it's by a pretty significant margin my least favorite of the first 6 episodes. And so it was a little bit disappointing. I think it's a little bit of going to be a disappointing release format where we go banger episode, banger episode, banger episode. People are trying to all watch really quick so they don't get anything spoiled. And then next week, it kind of takes a little bit of a turn in a different direction. And so that is my biggest critique, is not anything to do with the series, is more so this should not have been a 3-episode release. Each of these episodes are bangers, and we really should have had the time to sit with them, especially considering it's not that long of a season. But they were great. They were really, really great. Like, this is just such an awesome show. It kind of is weird. It kind of, between seasons, exits my mind a little bit. Like, I'm not really, especially this year where there's just so much content coming up, and it's like as soon as March hit, we're just on the roller coaster and we're not stopping till the end of the year. And so I wasn't really sitting there thinking like, oh, I can't wait for Invincible. I was excited to, do the show with you guys, I think, more than I actually was diving back into the show. And then as soon as it starts, as soon as the first credit hits of like, where can we find, bam, title card, Invincible, I'm just like, I'm back into it, and I'm fully invested. So yeah, I thought these first 3 episodes were really, really strong.
Yeah, I agree with everything all of you said. And I agree with you, TJ, as well, about the first 3 episodes. I'm just kind of burnt out on that kind of stuff. Like you said, we don't get enough episodes, in my opinion, already. So it just makes, we all love this show. So it just makes the whole experience feel shorter. And selfishly want it to last as long as possible, because Invincible season's always so much fun. But going back to Sean's point about
content, the reason for it is so there's not really big overlap with the boys.
Yeah, which I don't know. You guys are more knowledgeable about that stuff than I am, but it just never made sense to me why like you want to compete with yourself, like release both big shows at one time. I don't know. I think it's kind of silly. But back to what Sean was saying about consequences, I think, you hit it on the head. We talk about this a lot in our previous seasons, is Invincible really is kind of a story of consequences. And to me, that's something that this show does so much better than the comic. And I don't even necessarily want to say better, but it just emphasizes it a lot more. Like, we get to focus on these things a lot more, which I think perfectly brings us to the beginning of our first episode. By the way, spoiler warning for these first 3 episodes, because we are about to get deep into all of them. But the first episode, we pick up immediately where we left off. For those who don't remember, season 3, we ended with Conquest just beating the ever-loving crap out of Mark, just absolutely devastating. Here, we pick up right after. City's still destroyed. Everybody is kind of just off on their own thing. We see a bunch of heroes having funerals for all the people that died. And it's just all Mark just sitting with these consequences. We're just not even just Mark, but us as well as the audience. We are just kind of sitting and taking in all of the bad stuff that has happened. And I didn't even mention the Invincible War as well. That happened like a day before Conquest. So things are not good. And to me, like I said, this was my favorite part, maybe of the episode, but especially of how we open the season, because this is, again, something we don't really get in the comic book. It's very boom, 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 fast paced. But here, again, we kind of get a moment to breathe a little bit, which I absolutely love. TJ, I'll throw it off to you first on this one. How did you feel about this opening? Like we said, it is a little slower, but how did you feel about, like Sean was saying, really having to focus on all of the devastation that has been left?
I mean, that's classic Invincible, right? It's just basically making us go, this sucks, and making us live for those small, tiny little moments where everything seems really good, and Mark's powering up, or Eve's powering up, and we feel really great. But for the most part, it's just pure devastation. And we needed something like this. It would have felt wrong to move straight into whatever the next story is after all the chaos and devastation that happened at the end of season 3. And so I'm always shocked at how much they're able to fit into every single episode of Invincible, despite taking time to just sit and feel like they do at the beginning of this episode. And so especially kind of knowing that, like, hey, it's not like they're starving us. It's not like they're drawing this out so that they can fill runtime. These episodes are long and these episodes are jam-packed. And so when we do get these moments to just kind of like sit and catch our breath, I do think they're worthwhile.
Sean, what are your thoughts on, like I said, really sitting with sad boy Mark for a while?
I loved it. I think it was, I can't remember if it was season 2 or season 3, but they had that one episode with the two villains where there was no dialogue for like the first like 15 minutes or something like that. And this felt kind of similar, where they say a lot without saying anything. And I love a good show don't tell kind of thing. And they did, not only did they show where Mark was sitting, but they showed that, Oliver is like a hero on his own, like standing on his own, and the relationship with him and his mom is as strong as ever. Well, Debbie, not birth mom, but mom. And it was just a great way to set the stage and set the tone for what this season is. And like TJ said, yes, we love seeing Mark happy, but he's kind of like Spider-Man in the way where it's like the best versions of the character are when he's miserable, full of trauma. And that's him this season. That's for sure. It's him tackling with his decisions. And I love the whole struggle is him struggling. Like, should I have killed these people? And that's the biggest superhero question there is. And this show tackles it head on, which I think is really cool.
We love seeing Mark and Peter Parker both overcome trauma, but it's like, Mark especially, sometimes they're just like, it's too much. Give my a break. It's too much. Well, we were actually, I can't remember what group chat this was in, but I think Sean Damon brought that up to both of us this morning, our fellow co-host of various shows here. Damon brought up it's funny talking to various Spider-Man fans right now, because fans of the movies and fans of the animated shows, when we get a new trailer for a Spider-Man movie like that just happened, the fans of movies and the fans of shows are going, we need our guy unhappy. Yes, look at this. He's depressed. He's just like me. He has no money. He's just like me. And then you talk to comic book Spider-Man fans, and they're like, nothing good has happened to this dude for 14 years. Please give my guy a break. Please give my guy something happy to happen to him.
14 years is generous, I would say.
Yeah. I don't know what happened 14 years ago. That was just but that's the feeling with Mark.
It's a law of the universe. Peter always has to be sad, and Uncle Ben always has to be dead. Those are like two comic. And Invincible has to get his ass kicked. Those are like the tenets of comics. Tom, what did you think about this super depressing opening and how we're just, again, faced with all of the consequences from last season?
Yeah, well, it was interesting because, like, watching the show, like, this first episode, I was like, he saved the day, right? Like, why is everyone so annoyed at him? Like, he's trying to help out. Like, everyone's so pissed off with him. But then I remember, like, oh yeah, a bunch of other Invincibles from different universes try to destroy everyone and kill him. So I was like, okay, it makes sense why they're so hard on him. But no, I think it was a really that whole montage with, I don't know what the song was, but it was such a like somber kind of way of similar to what Sean was saying, like the show don't tell, of kind of like just showing what the impact of the world is on kind of Mark's actions the past season, and then how he's trying to like rebuild that kind of trust, I thought was really, really well done. And I think, yeah, I mean, like you guys are saying, it's a universal law that like Mark has to go through this stuff similar to Peter Parker. So seeing him grapple with these consequences and really just kind of lash out these couple 3 episodes, like and then comparing that to, I think it's a really cool thing that they're doing where, you know, Mark's kind of having to deal with the consequences of his actions and other people's actions on his kind of behalf versus his father, who is also kind of having to atone for his actions and how he's kind of dealing with that. So seeing that kind of contrast and how they're both dealing with that in very different ways, like Nolan is almost handling that way better than Mark is in a lot of ways. I guess he's had more time to deal with that, but yeah, I think it's just really smart, and it's hard to watch sometimes, but it's really just like clever writing, and I love all that stuff.
Yeah, I love, that's probably one of my other favorite parts is, like you said, the parallels that we get between Nolan and Mark, especially in the next episode that we'll get to in a couple minutes. Just masterfully done. And I wanted, Sean, you mentioned this, so I thought it's a perfect time to get into this. We got to talk a little bit about Oliver, because Oliver gets a lot to do in these first 3 episodes, a lot more than he does in the comics. And we get this really great scene during this whole montage we're talking about where he saves people on this bridge and he's fighting the supervillain. And I just love that, because last season we saw a dude was a straight up psychopath, and he was like, yeah, like, we kill supervillains. Why not? Like, why would you not kill them? And here, not only does he not kill the supervillain, but he actually saves the citizens on the bridge, where we had that whole conversation between him and Mark where he's like, yeah, humans suck. Like, I don't like them. Why should I save them? So I just thought that was really cool to like show how his time with Debbie and his time on Earth has given him this more humanity like Mark has, and why Mark isn't like Omni-Man. So I absolutely love that. Tom, I'll keep it with you for this one as well. What did you think about Oliver coming from last season and seeing him struggle with, you know, being an alien, human, whatever, and now seeing him kind of come into his own as a full-on superhero?
Yeah, Oliver was a real pain in the last season. Like, he was just kind of like some of the stuff he was coming out with, I was like, man, it's really hard to root for this guy. But I think it's been really cool to see how that's flipped. Yeah, like you're saying in this episode and this season so far, in terms of like, he's a bit older now, and he's kind of, it's interesting how he's kind of flipped in terms of like, now Oliver seems much more of like Mark's moral compass, whereas before it was like Mark was really having to be Oliver's moral compass.
Yeah.
So seeing that kind of that role reversal, I think is really interesting. And yeah, seeing him like get a lot more to do now, and how he's kind of like adapting as his own kind of superhero, I think is really cool. I like how kind of, I guess, like floaty he is in comparison to Mark. Like, he kind of like floats about when he's flying around, whereas Mark is just kind of like, I don't know, a bit more stoic and serious. But yeah, I think Oliver's been a great improvement. I really like seeing his kind of role here.
Sean, I know you have been Team Oliver for a while, and you've always questioned me, like, why do you always say he's such a little shit, like, blah, blah, blah. And
there were times you made it sound like he was going to be like fighting in this war for leading the Viltrumites.
Right.
Yeah. I thought, I mean,
I wouldn't
be the biggest heel turn imaginable.
I wouldn't go. I'll just leave it, but I'll just say, like I said, they. Going back to what we're talking about with Mark and what we will be talking about with Nolan, is how the show is just giving all of these characters just like so much more emotional weight, and I mean just straight up character development. Because in the book, Oliver is like, again, psycho, murders people, doesn't really care about humans, and then just immediately shifts and is just, I'm good now. We never really get to see any moments of reflection from him. We never get to see any progression of him as a hero. Just, he shows up, I'm young Omni Boy man now, and you know, he just is on the team. So again, that's one of my favorite parts of the entire show, but especially with Oliver, because again, it actually gives him a character arc. It besides just being like Invincible's sidekick. So I kind of went on a tangent there, but Sean, what did you think of being vindicated in your Oliver love?
I was actually more just watching it confused. I was like, my friend TJ says this guy is awful, and I was like,
TJ's wrong.
He's hugging his mom. He's worried about Mark's well-being. I was like, what do you mean this guy is bad?
I was in the same boat as you, man. I was saying the same thing. I'm like, what? Oliver loves Debbie? What are you talking about?
It was great, man, and it's so cool to see. I don't know, just see his growth in such a short time, and obviously, like that's like emotionally and character wise and physical wise, because he obviously, since he's an alien, he grow, and he comes from the Thraxans. What did they have? Like their lifespan was like 30 days or something like super short.
Super short.
So to know that, you know, he has this like accelerated growth, and he even makes the jokes, and he's like, oh, I'll be stronger than Mark soon. And it's like, he's probably right. he's probably very right, just because of his race and everything like that. But yeah, it's just so cool to see him. And and like Tom was saying about how the role reversal, it's also like we're talking about parallels. It's a very good parallel to see him like gain humanity and Mark kind of losing it. It's kind of that whole maturing versus youth kind of thing you see in a lot of different media. As you know, there's a certain innocence to children and young people until things in life that happen in life all the time take that away from you or start to dim it. And obviously Mark, I mean, not that Oliver hasn't gone through that stuff, he's gone through some really messed up stuff as well, but Mark has gone through more for sure. And it might be him finding humanity, it might be help healing that, rather to where Mark is in a very much of a place of being confused at his place in the world. And as a protector of that world, he's very conflicted about how to do it the right way. And as he's growing, it continues to grow as a hero. And as Cecil puts it, he's the most powerful being on the planet. And that's a lot of responsibility to carry. as a, you know, like, what is he, like 20 or something, or 21 or something? Like, he's in his early 20s at the latest. Mm-hmm. Like, that's a lot to shoulder at that young of an age. That's crazy. But yeah, I love the Oliver stuff. I think it's great. And not to ruin anything, but there's some very cool Oliver stuff this season that I love. Yeah. So like Oliver is kind of like one of the MVPs of the season for me, to be honest. What he does is really, really cool, especially character wise, for sure.
You know, as someone who's also the most powerful being on their own respective planet, I can empathize with Mark and Oliver. And
naturally,
Canada,
Canada.
I don't even remember where I was going with that, because I was just so excited to make that joke. I love the Oliver. I love the Oliver stuff too. He's rapidly growing. He's rapidly climbing my character power rankings. Like he's very quickly becoming among my favorite characters. I'm still an Adam Eve over everything kind of guy, but Oliver I think might be slotting into that 3 tier behind Mark. And it's, you know, it's a little tropey, but I don't think it's an overused one. And I think it's cool to see the like big brother, little brother dynamic between the two of them, where when the little brother's young, the big brother is the morality center. He's got to teach him how to become a man. He's got to teach him how to become a good person. He's got to teach him how to not become a psycho killer. And you know what? He does a good job of it. Mark and Debbie both do a really good job of instilling those values within Oliver. And because they have done such a good job, as Mark now takes that darker turn, it's Oliver who has to be the moral center. He's got to be the one who's looking at his brother and saying, hey, you're going too close to the line. How do I know? Because you're the one who taught me this. You're the one who taught me that what you're doing is going too far. You're the one who taught me that we need to make sure we take care of ourselves if we're going to take care of other people. You're not doing that right now. And so it's kind of cool to see that, you know, as both of them age, that swaps a little bit.
100%. We get such a great example of that later when him and Invincible are fighting the dragon. And really quickly before we move on, because again, we have a lot to get to, I just want to mention this really briefly, but I also really love the scene of Oliver getting his new costume from Art. And he has this conversation with Debbie where he says that he's keeping the Omni-Man logo because he fought in the Invincible War. He went toe to toe with Conquest. And so the symbol is his now. Like, he's reclaiming the symbol, and now he's using it as something good, which is not, we did not see that in the comics. That's completely new for the show. But again, just such a great example of how, again, Kirkman is fleshing out these characters more, especially the kind of, more side characters of the Invincible universe. And again, just giving Oliver some say in his own actions. Because again, in the book, he's really just, his entire story is very contingent on Invincible and Omni-Man. So I love how he actually gets a say on, even just something as simple as what his costume is.
It's always cool seeing an adaptation like this with the creators heavily involved years after their original creation. It's something that, like, Rick Riordan with Percy Jackson talked about. He was like, hey, look, I'm better at this now. I wrote these stories over a decade ago, over 2 decades ago, like whatever it is. I'm actually I'm better at this now. I see things within this story that I didn't see before. And I kind of feel like that's a little bit the case with Kirkman too. Obviously, comic book to TV, it's different. The adaptation isn't going to be one for one. But I kind of feel like there's certain things where he looks back and goes, okay, I can actually, this is a good story. I can make it better.
Yeah. 100%. A comic is 22 pages, and Invincible came out monthly. It wasn't a every week kind of book, so there just wasn't time to really dive into these kind of things. So I think the show is perfect opportunity for that. And Kirkman has openly admitted that many, many times, and we can see this with characters like Eve, Debbie, Amber back in season 1. He has openly admitted that he sort of regrets the way that he wrote some of his women characters early on in his career, and sees the show as a way to kind of correct that and give these characters a little bit more urgency. So that's definitely not a mistake. And I think, again, just is one of the things that makes the show even stronger. But speaking of characters, we also get introduced to one of our big players of this season, one of Invincible's big villains, Dinosaurus. Dinosaur who can talk and is an evil genius scientist. Just attacks Mark out of nowhere when he's trying to clean up the city. And basically, Dinosaurus is all about eco-terrorism. He wants to save the world by killing everybody. Like, he thinks that's the only solution. Tom, I'll throw it off to you first. Being our first villain introduced to the season, what did you think of Dinosaurus? Like, I remember reading him for the first time in the comics. Like, what the hell is this dude's deal, man?
Yeah, he's such a weird. I guess he's like kind of like the Hulk, right? But he's a giant dinosaur instead. Which that gets me points off the bat. To be honest, I love dinosaurs. So,
He reminds me of that Spider-Man panel, that Spider-Man comic book panel, where it's like, why are you doing this? With your powers, you could cure cancer. And the flying pterodactyl's like, I don't want to cure cancer. I want to turn everyone into dinosaurs.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah, that's the thing. But this guy actually does want to, I guess, save the ecosystem. But yeah, I think I don't know. I've Dinosaurus has been one of those characters where it's like he's been hyped up like a lot. Like, I don't really know that much about him, but for kind of peripherally from like comic fans of like, I'll just wait for Dinosaurus. So yeah, I think he's a cool introduction. I love that scene with him and Mark where Mark almost kills him, I guess. I think it was just like a really cool dynamic of like how he like literally doesn't know what the kind of dinosaur half is doing, I guess, seemingly at this point. But yeah, just really excited to see what kind of the hype is about, because yeah, I like this character's been talked about so much, so I can't wait to see when they bring him back and what they kind of do with him. Hopefully later in the season. I haven't seen the rest of the episodes, but we'll see, I guess.
Yeah, and that we'll throw that in too. Thank you for reminding me. Dinosaurus, like you said, he's really just a dude. David Anders, his name, and you made the pair. David Anders, Bruce Banner. It's basically the Hulk, just kind of reverse, where Dinosaurus is intelligent. But Mark straight up almost murders him. Like, he's fully ready to murder him until the Guardians show up. So, Sean, what did you think of Dinosaurus? And do you think Mark would have killed him if the Guardians didn't show up?
I don't know. It's hard to say. It's like the big thing with these first 3 episodes is him on that edge of crossing the line, and he does cross that line too, which makes it even more when it comes back in subsequent episodes. You're like, is it happening again? So that's rough. I like the character. I know what he says as into the belief or like the thoughts in Mark's head that he's not being a good enough hero. I'm just worried they maybe introduce him to leave a nugget that I don't know when that's going to be answered, because it's obvious they're heading towards the Viltrumite War this season. Like obviously after episode 2, that's a very obvious thing that they're full speed ahead on that. So I'm wondering if it's like, hey, after we get back from space, we're gonna set up some nuggets for stuff in Earth after. That's my thought process on the rewatch of being like, oh, okay, is that where we're headed? Obviously, there's a ton of Earth-based threats. They make that very clear in these first 3 episodes. Well, I guess 1 and 3, because 2 is, it's the Omni-Man and Alan show. But there's so many threats, and some are returning, some are new. It never stops with Earth. It's kind of, I feel it's like the Avengers problem. It's like as soon as heroes get released, like the world sees it as like a place where these threats can come. And I feel like the same thing happened with Invincible. Like kind of there was always heroes around, but like when the Omni-Man bubble burst, that's when stuff really started happening. That's way crazier. So it was a cool tease. It's just that, I like Tom said, I've only read a little bit of the comics, which pretty much cover part of season 1, and it was the same thing. I was like, I know they handle the big plot beats from the comics, so I'm like, I kind of just want to experience in the show since I love the show so much. So, I'm just letting the show take me where it's going. I know it's same thing. I know some stuff because the internet's a thing, and you see some things and everything like that, or just having a conversation with you, and it's stuff that doesn't bother me. Like I ask about it. But yeah, it was a cool tease, but I don't know what I can say about this character. I mean, it's cool, like Hulk turning into. I didn't even think about that, which is weird. I didn't think about that, but yeah, it is Hulk where he turns into a dinosaur, which is kind of way cooler.
Yeah,
to be honest.
Yeah,
you turn into a genius dinosaur. That's cool.
That can also hurt Invincible, which is like one of the only things that can do that. TJ, what did you think of Dinosaurus?
Well, as someone who can also turn into a genius dinosaur, I can empathize. I agree with Sean said. I think it's kind of like a setup for the future with like we are all going to collide with this Viltrumite War storyline. All signs are pointing towards that. And so I do think this would be like just showing, hey, there are still other threats other than this, because I do think that's been a bit of a worry for me within the show at times, like not in this episode, but at times throughout the first 3 seasons, where they do such a good job of building up how scary and strong the Viltrumites are that it does at time make other threats feel like Mark's a Viltrumite. He'll beat them. He'll figure out a way. Like, these are the people we really got to worry about. And so it is nice when we get a character like Battle Beast, Dinosaurus, Alan now, where it's like, okay, they're pretty much just as strong. They can fuck with these guys too. And that to me is exciting, of just knowing there are other people on that similar power level. This isn't just Goku flying around the universe being like, nobody can stop me. There actually are people who can, continuously beat the shit out of Mark. And so I don't think I have a specific affinity to Dinosaurus, but I do think we need more characters on that Viltrumite tier eventually. And so getting basically a second one to Battle Beast is pretty nice.
Yeah, and I really don't want to spoil too much for anybody out there, because I love the books and I love the show, and I would never want to ruin it for somebody. So, but what I will say about Dinosaurus is that he will be very important moving on. And the one thing I will point out is we've been talking a lot about Mark's new kind of conflicted outlook on how to deal with supervillains and dealing with all of that. And again, Dinosaurus's whole shtick is that he wants to save the world, but he is also willing to sacrifice large parts of the population in order to do that. He's willing to make the hard choice in order to say for what he thinks will save everybody. So I think just with that, you can kind of see how that can affect Mark, and especially where his headspace is at right now. So I know we don't see much of him right now, but like I said, dinosaurs will be important moving on. So definitely keep an eye out. And like you said, TJ and Sean, there's still problems on Earth. Like we got Viltrumites to deal with, but there are still a lot of things to deal with on Earth. And that brings us, I think, perfectly to the second part of this episode, which I'll try to make quick because we still got 2 episodes to get through. But we get another new villain, Universa, which she is from another planet, has this electrical staff, basically coming to steal all of our energy. Invincible and Eve kind of do quick work of her. Just kind of a cool fight scene. I will mention she is voiced by Danielle Guerrera. I hope I'm saying that right. But from Black Panther and also from The Walking Dead, which cool connection there. Another Kirkman property. But big end of this episode is the Sequids. Sequids return. If y'all don't remember, those are the freaky little aliens that control your mind. We saw them in season 1. I think season 2 and 3 as well. But they have made it to Earth, completely take over the city, and Invincible commits another murder. We're talking about how he's walking this line. Well, he crosses it again, and he kills Russ. So, Tom, I'll throw it off to you first on this one. What were your reaction to the Sequids? And I want to ask you, I'll get everyone's opinion on this. Do you think Mark was justified in killing Russ to stop the Sequids?
Yeah, I think I mean, it's cool to see the sequence back because we have seen those continuous teasers. It's like a lot of these, like you guys have been saying, like a lot of these villains and or characters in general, they never feel wasted in Invincible or in the Invincible universe. Whenever they're introduced and then reintroduced, it always feels like there's a greater purpose. So it's nice to see that like these kind of teasers from earlier on in the earlier seasons, they eventually come back, like the sequence here. I think it was a really cool kind of setup with the Guardians having to, like save all these people who've been infected by this threat. Was he justified? That's the thing I've been grappling, trying to figure out where I gotta sit on. I don't know. I think he probably was at that point. I think, judging by how long they had before, I mean, Rex, Rudy, Robot, whatever he's going by now.
Whatever the heck his name is at this point.
Yeah, which is so weird. But he says like, oh, we don't know like how long the shield would have held. But from our perspective, we see how close it was. So, I mean, it sucks that Russ died, but they saved most of the people that were infected by the Sequids. So I think in this case, maybe it was the right call to make. But yeah, that's the great thing about the show. It's such a kind of moral quandary with all of these different decisions. So you really could go either way with a lot of the stuff. But I don't know. I think Mark's fine on this one occasion, right?
You're gonna give him a pass on this one?
Yeah, I'm gonna say that. I'll stand by it.
Sean, what do you think? Does Mark get a pass, or is this him giving into his dark side?
I think he does get a pass, and this is the perfect example of that problem he's had, because he has a chance to get rid of them for once and all. They keep coming back. They've come back since season 1. And now he finally puts an end to it, and there it is. You know what I mean? Like that's what it is. He ended it. And like what TJ said, I will agree. If they did this episode by episode, that is a great cliffhanger to leave on.
Yes. Can you imagine? I so agree with you, TJ. They should have done it week by week. Can you imagine that as a cliffhanger?
We wouldn't have had to do a 3-hour podcast. We could have done a 1-hour podcast. Shout out to Sean for reminding me. No, TJ, we can't do a what you're watching segment before the episode.
Good call.
Save that for when we're covering 1 episode, not for when we're covering 3.
So justified then?
That's justified. Yeah. I mean, I totally get why he did it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is going in the future, but in episode 3, Cecil said, I would do the same thing, which I don't know if it's good or bad for Mark, because obviously Mark and Cecil have not seen eye to eye on things, and Cecil has rebuilt a Viltrumite's head to save him for reasons. So I don't know. That kind of puts it in a light where you're like, I don't really know. But when you're trying to protect the world, if you get rid of one less, brain infecting species, probably for the greater good, I would say.
I don't know. I mean, do we see in, I think it's episode 2 or 3, which we'll talk about, so I'll just spoil it now. One of them do still get out. So, I mean, did Invincible really stop him by killing Russ? I mean, one still hitches a ride on Robot. And I will point out, too, that technically Russ was a completely innocent person. Like, he was just an astronaut that first of all, got left on Mars by Invincible. Yep. Then came back with an alien in his stomach, and then had to be an alien slave. So Russ is completely innocent. So I'm not going to say that I fault Mark for it, but again, he was an innocent dude. And I'll also say in the comic, Mark does not apologize. So in the show, we see like he says sorry to Russ, and it's kind of like, I don't want to do this, but I have to. In the book, he straight up is just like, yeah, I'm going to kill you now. And he's like, I've been holding back so the Guardians can kind of get safe so I can kill you. And it's like, whoa, dude. So jeez. I love, again, in the show, we're getting more of this kind of conflict, right? Like Mark is facing this grief that he has. TJ, Mark justified or not? Are you knocking him for killing Russ, or do you think it was the right call?
Both. Like that's fair. Kind of where it's a very humane decision, even though he's innocent at the end of the day. If you got to kill one to protect the many, I think that is the ethical type of thing. Like if you're looking at it as a doctor perspective,
you sound like Dinosaurus right now, my friend.
Has like a very if somebody has an infectious disease, you need to do whatever you can to contain that infectious disease so it doesn't affect the whole world. But when you're a superhero, when you're the most powerful being on the planet, you kind of have to be held to a higher standard than humanity. You got to be held to, that almost Spider-Man, Superman-esque philosophy of there's always another way. There's always another way, because if there's not, what am I even doing this for? And so it's a bit of both. Do I think he ultimately protected more people by killing somebody? Yes. Does that mean it was the right decision? I don't think it necessarily does yet. I don't put too much judgment on Mark for making that decision, but it's also you're all right. Well, you look at it as a tier of superheroes. You're not Superman, bro. You're not. Maybe you could be one day, but that's certainly not what you are right now. You're not at that level. And so it's a bit of a case of I don't pass too much judgment, but I also don't give him kudos.
Yeah, you're not patting him on the back, but you're also like, I get it. Which is fair. I think, like you said, I agree and also don't agree. I think that's how you're supposed to feel. But at the very end of this episode, which we don't really have to talk too much about because I think we all knew this was coming, Conquest is back, baby. He, of course, did not die. Cecil was pulling tricks up his sleeve, kept him in a little prison, and of course he escaped because he's really gonna be gone forever. But again, I feel like everyone has suspected that when we got that tease last season. So let's move on to episode 2 because we got a lot of good meat to talk about here. And again, we'll kind of brush through a couple points that I wish we could get more into. But first off, let's talk about the Viltrumites, because we get the full story of the Viltrumites here, which we kind of got a bullshit version of from Nolan in season 1. But here we get to see the kind of full extent of that with a great little origin story for Nolan, where we see his parents did the same exact thing that he did to Mark and beat the shit out of him when I'm guessing his birthday. And we also learn that the Viltrumites were then decimated by something called the Scourge virus, which absolutely went all through their population and killed 99.9% of them, leaving only 50 left, which is why they have been sending their soldiers to planets in order to breed with the population, in order to bring their numbers up. I know that was a long explanation, but TJ, I'll throw it to you first. What was your reaction to seeing this secret history of the Viltrumites, and not only that, but like the full extent of just the brutality of the Viltrumite culture?
It was really cool. It was really, really cool. You know, very taking it back to Dragon Ball Z again, very Saiyan-esque of here's this ultimately powerful conquering planet. Oh shit, you know, this is a virus instead of Frieza, but oh shit, something comes and wipes them all out. There are a few left that are still really strong, but they're nothing like they once were. They aren't the conquerors that they once were. I thought it was a really cool story. It gives you, again, like not an excuse for Nolan's actions, but an understanding as to why Nolan is the way he is. And it is a bit of like a different thought process from, oh, this human did a bad thing. We should know. They should know better because all of humanity teaches that you shouldn't be behaving this way. This is an alien who on his planet was taught this is exactly how you were supposed to behave. This is how he was bred. So again, it's not an excuse for the evil actions, but it's an understanding of, you know, why he is the way that he is.
100%. Sean, what was your reaction to a young Nolan? Which I'll say too, no mistake that he looks exactly like Mark. That they made the young version of him literally identical.
That's a straight. What if Mark was totally white?
Yeah,
that is Mark Grayson.
which is like weird to think about because it's like, yeah, Mark is half Asian, so why does he look just like that? It's weird.
There was like a slight difference. There was a slight difference between the two of them, and that's kind of like how I got up. Like, this is white Mark.
Yeah, but my reaction was pretty much Alan's. You're like, wow, I was thinking, I was like, wow, I was like, yeah. When you're raised by like a weird dictating country, of course, crazy, or planet, I guess. But it was like what Alan said. He's like, wow, I almost felt bad for you guys for a second. It's like, because it's brutal. It's a brutal cold open for an episode. And I think it's even cooler that you see that Nolan got the virus and got it at a point where he obviously survived, but it was very cool to see that journey. And another thing that's very important too with the whole virus is that it made it so there could never be another pure Viltrumite ever again. So it did kill the pure version of their race. And that's why kind of Mark is so important, and why, you know, they went in that whole thing of like calling Oliver like an abomination and kind of calling Mark that too, but they were proving to see if he can be just as strong as a pure Viltrumite. So then it wasn't the plan they would find the planet or planets that provide the best yielding spawn, so they could continue their lineage through that.
It would be a really cool storyline to get, like, give us a 20-year-old Viltrumite and pit them against Mark. Let's see where he actually is in the process. You know, like,
well, there is no 20-year-old Viltrumites anymore.
Exactly. Like, go in an alternate reality, pluck young Nolan out of that story and plop him in our universe and have him go toe to toe with Mark.
Oh, Mark's done. Mark's done, dude. Okay. Easily.
So
100%.
Yeah, here's the thing I'm thinking of. Because this is crazy.
He's essentially won against every other Viltrumite.
Yeah, but no, the only reason he won against Nolan or survived is because Nolan developed love for him. If you got a 20-year-old Nolan who never been to Earth and don't know Mark from Joe down the street, he's Viltrumite gut punching him in 2 seconds.
I guess I need to know about the physiology of a Viltrumite, right? Because it's like a 20-year-old human. Well, they're about 5 years away from their physical peak, the strongest they will ever be. A 20-year-old Viltrumite, I'm kind of thinking that in the sense of like, well, if they're going to be the strongest they can be at 200 years old or whatever it is, 20, they're probably really far away from it.
Yeah,
So
but they
I'm
have to
picturing
fight their
20-year-old
parents,
Nolan
and they're like,
nowhere near as stronger as current Nolan.
but you have to remember they have to fight their parents 2-on-1 when they turn 18 or whatever and survive
Yeah.
after
But he
being
lost.
trained to be a killer.
But he
from
lost.
birth.
His parents beat
Technically,
the
I
shit out of him.
guess. Yeah, his dad said stop or whatever, but still he held his own against
Yeah.
two adult
Yeah.
Viltrumites. Crazy. So yeah, it was amazing to see finally get more of this picture filled in of Viltrumites and everything like that. And yeah, brutal stuff. And it's like you see this happen to him, and you see that pretty much their entire race get knocked out, and you're like, kind of feel bad, but at the same time, we're like, oh, he kind of deserved it too.
I didn't feel bad. I was like, good. I was like Thetis later in this episode. Good. Screw him. But I also really love I think that it's just such a great parallel between Mark and Nolan, specifically the shot of his mom just beating the crap out of him, which is almost identical to when Nolan was beating the crap out of Mark in season 1. So I love that part about it too. Tom, what did you think? We were talking about this a little bit in the beginning of this with your initial reaction. The Viltrumite history, the whole thing with the Scourge virus. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I thought this was like so fascinating. I love seeing this whole like, yeah, kind of like a real look into their culture past the kind of sanitized version we get like earlier in the show from Nolan. So seeing how he actually grew up, and then like I didn't even think about it, but the fact that he gets the virus is such a cool motivator for him to actually go on this quest because there are so few of them. And that was another mic drop moment for me. It was like when they mentioned like, oh yeah, like billions upon billions of these Viltrumites have died. I'm like, oh, they probably still have like a couple billion left still, right? And then they're like, no, there's only 50 of us left. I thought that was like a crazy thing. Obviously, me not knowing like what's to come for the rest of the story, not reading the comic and stuff. I thought that was such a cool reveal with that. So yeah, really loved fleshing out kind of Nolan's kind of motivations of where he was coming from before, and now comparing that to conflicted now even a little bit, even though he is, deciding to help the coalition and Alan and Thetis. There is this still like lingering part of him that's like gripping onto the kind of Viltrumite culture. Even though he knows in his heart that he has to kind of like exercise that, I guess, from his thought process. But yeah, just like I loved all this stuff. I thought it was so cool to see play out.
Yeah, and we have to remember, so like I said, the Scourge virus, Craig says kills billions and billions of them, which the book gives the number of 99.9% of the population. But we also have to remember that before that, the Viltrumites had a huge civil war with each other called the Purge that lasted for hundreds of years, where they murdered each other until only the strongest were left. So like you said, 50 is like a shocking number, but when you think about it, it's like, yeah, they just shot themselves in the foot over and over and over again. But I want to hang on Nolan right now because I feel like that's kind of the crux of this whole episode. We get some fun space adventures with him and Alan. We get the introduction of Space Racer, one of my favorite characters from the comics, voiced by Winston Duke, giving us 2 for 2 for Black Panther voice actors this season. But again, a large part of this episode is really Nolan sitting with this grief, and not only grief, but just kind of confronting the consequences of everything that he and the Viltrumite Empire has done. Very similar to what we saw with Mark in the first episode. Again, creating such a great parallel. And we mentioned this a little bit, but we get this great scene later with Nolan and Alan, where Nolan is basically like, yeah, like I fully believed in the Viltrumite mission. Like I understand now that it was bad, but at the end of I'm still like, those are still my people. So like we see that, like you were saying, Sean, while he has reformed, he still is struggling to kind of shed this Viltrumite dogma that we saw in this flashback that is just literally beaten into you from birth. So TJ, I want to bring it to you again. Just what how did you feel, again, kind of going back to what we were talking about with these smaller moments, these moments kind of emphasizing these character growth? How did you feel getting to see that with Nolan, and how, again, that trajectory is with his reform?
It's great. You can't have a redemption arc without spending the time in these moments. One of the things that makes Zuko's arc in Avatar: The Last Airbender one of the very best character arcs of all time is it's not simply I was bad, now I'm good now. It's I was bad, now I want to start making a change. I'm about to change. Nah, never mind. I'm going to go back to my roots. Okay, no, maybe I should change. I'm going to try and live with the other people. The people that I'm trying to live with and I once conquered, they don't like me because I was a conqueror. Why not? I better apologize. They're not ready to hear my apology because I caused them so much pain. All right, I guess I got to give them their space. And now that I'm giving them space, I got to put in the time. I have to show and prove to people that I've changed. It's not a quick process. And so it is making his potential redemption arc feel really earned, because when you were the ultimate mega asshole, we need to see you sit in it. We got to see you suffer and grow a little bit before we can accept you as on the good guy team.
100%. Sean, what did you think about, again, we've talked a lot about Nolan's reform in past seasons. So did this kind of solidify it for you?
A little, yeah. I mean, I kind of always thought he was redeemable to a point, you know? And I think we've talked about too that he seems a lot more apologetic than the comics, a lot more remorseful, a lot more human than I guess the comics, I think, as you said, have led on. And those decisions have made me feel, and the decisions he continues to make, like even apologizing to Space Ranger and stuff. And he's like, did you just apologize? Like him being so caught off guard by that is showing that he is changing. Like he is trying to make that change. And it's so funny the whole time he's like, I'm not joining your war kind of thing this episode. But I think everyone could tell you're like, he's joining that war. You know what I mean? Like that was the big, you know, arc of this episode for sure. It felt like its own like mini movie, especially with like, you know, starting with the Viltrumite flashback into where it goes. And I think that's the best thing about the Alan the Alien episodes. They always feel like these kind of like one shot comics in the middle of seasons that I love so much. And yeah, you know, I do think like, and that doesn't mean that everyone should forgive him or will forgive him, but he is putting in the work, and that's got to stand for something. And I think that's the important part. At least as a viewer, characters in the show, I would totally understand if people don't forgive for what he did, because he I mean, like imagine if the Superman killed the Justice League and then left and then came back, you know, like how do you think Earth would feel? Probably not great.
Yeah, totally not cool, man.
Probably not great.
Tom, what do you think? Do you think Omni-Man is redeemed or redeemable? Or do you think that he's going to go back to his Viltrumite programming?
I think, yeah, but the way this episode was going, I think like it really showed that he's like, he really wants to atone for what he's done and genuinely feels really sorry for like his actions. Sean was mentioning, you know, like he is putting in the work, like you know, saying sorry and going around and showing up for like what he's done. I think it's nothing has shown that more by, you know, he's had to endure like Alan and Telia going at it like night after night. I think that alone, I'm like, okay, we can give him a little bit of
sounds like, okay, you're off the hook just for having to deal with that.
Yeah, that seems like a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of, you know, late nights, especially because he could have, you know, slept in another bedroom the whole time.
At what point are you knocking on that door being like, you got room for one more? You're doing this in front of me. Can I at least partake?
Maybe you did. We didn't see the whole scenario.
It's an Invincible show. There's nothing family about it. It's not a family show.
But yeah, I think no, this is just such good stuff. Yeah, TJ, you mentioned Zuko. Like, I think that's such a good comparison of like this kind of redemption arc. I love it's one of my favorite tropes in fiction. I think just seeing the villain kind of have to grapple with everything they've done and then find ways that they can really not fix it, but like try to address at least and try to make things as right as they possibly can. So seeing him going around, the stuff with like Space Racer, I think was my favorite. Those interactions and like how Space Racer's just kind of confused. Like he's not even like necessarily happy about it. He's just like, why are you acting this way? This is weird. So I love all that stuff. And yeah, I can't wait to see how this sets up for when we finally get that collision course between Nolan and Mark finally reuniting, and how that like how Mark's going to take that, and like whether he's going to like really accept like if Nolan is like actually trying to be a good guy at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I said, I love seeing, which sounds weird, but I love seeing Nolan suffer here, because like TJ was just saying with the Zuko comparison, like, and this is no disrespect to Robert Kirkman. I love Invincible comics. Again, there's just not enough time for all this stuff, but that's basically how Nolan's redemption kind of goes in the comics. He's like, I'm good now. And it's like, all right, let's fight the Viltrumites. And I mean, that's basically it. He does apologize to Space Racer, but it's really just a kind of, I'm sorry. We never really see him having to be confronted with all of these things like we see with the planets that the Viltrumites destroyed, and what he did to Space Racer, and again his conversation with Alan. So for me, being a comic reader, I was very much screw Nolan for a lot of the book, way past his supposed redemption. Like when he was like, yeah, I'm good. It's like, dude, you did nothing. You literally just decided I'm good. Like nothing. So I love here how they're making Nolan actually face these consequences and have to, like you said, do the work in order to gain this redemption. And again, I've read the comics like 100 times at this point, and this episode made me, I don't know, sympathize, but understand Nolan like way better than any of the comics. So this kind of stuff is just absolutely great. And we end off this episode with the reveal of Thetis is developing a new Scourge virus. So the Scourge virus we just talked about that decimated the Viltrumites, still in play, and will definitely be a very important piece in the war to come. Sean, do you got something to say? It looked like you were about to throw in a point there.
No.
Okay. Just making sure.
Nodding in agreement with you.
Nodding and just fascinated at what I'm saying.
Yes.
Moving on, episode 3. So episode 3 is kind of not a sidestep, but more of a fun superhero episode. We get the return of Titan, Machine Head, the Order, all those weirdos that we saw in last season. And we also get a lot of cool stuff with Cecil and Mark, which we talked a little bit about, but I want to start the discussion there because I think it really goes into everything we're talking about with these consequences. Mark kind of crossing this line. We see that Cecil is genuinely concerned for Mark. He calls him to the GDA and they kind of have this whole discussion together. And for me, I think that this again just really emphasizes that Mark cannot escape all these terrible things. Like he has to face them. And Cecil recognizes that you are slipping very, very quickly. So, Tom, I'll stick with you on this one. Throw it to you first. What did you think of this kind of dynamic between Invincible and Cecil, especially since Cecil was kind of an adversary to Mark for most of last season?
Yeah, what's the thing? It's like it's kind of a troubling sign when Cecil's the one that's like, "Whoa, you gotta like calm down. You're doing some pretty crazy stuff here." Yeah, I think it's really because you know, like with Cecil, he's such an interesting character because you don't. Like he does things and it's like, is he actually on your side here? Like what is his true motivation? But this is like one of the few times where it's felt like, yes, Cecil actually is trying to talk to him as like a person rather than kind of like just as like a massive weapon of mass destruction, which he does like call out. He says like, you're the most powerful like thing on earth, but he really does seem like he's actually trying to keep Mark's humanity in check. And to see like Mark resist against that, but also kind of hear him on some of his points. It's interesting seeing like his parallels between this conversation and like the conversation that Mark has with Eve's dad in episode 1. Like the kind of two kind of sides of like he's of like, what am I trying to say? Like, Mark is just like kind of caught between so many different kind of opinions of what he should do that he doesn't really know himself like what is like the right thing. But so he was saying, like, he kind of just needs to feel the feelings that he's kind of going through rather than kind of bunch them all up and then like, which has ultimately resulted in all of this lashing out against like other people and killing people and that sort of thing. So yeah, I thought this was like, Cecil is one of my favorite characters in the show, so it's great to see like whenever these two characters are like standing off against one another, it's such a great thing to see.
I totally agree. Sean, what did you think of Cecil and Mark's dynamic, again, coming from them being adversaries in last season, and now things are, I don't want to say chill necessarily, but do you think Cecil's being genuine, or do you think that he's just trying to tell Mark what he wants to hear to get him back on his side?
No, I do think he is genuine, but there's always an ulterior motive with Cecil that's always hidden. I mean, they were not shy about showing the invincible robots. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's all I'm gonna say. And so that's a problem. That obviously is another thing that's setting up for things to come. Yeah, I'm sure that's not gonna come back at all.
Yeah, no.
But I do think he was genuine and worried about him. But also, is he being genuine for the sake of the Earth? He is the most powerful being on the Earth. He is on their side. Whether he is towing this line of, kill or be killed, we can't forget the end of season 3. He's like, if someone gets in the way of my family, I will kill them. So he has proven that is true. So that's rough. So yeah, but I do feel it was genuine as Cecil can be. It was cool to see his backstory. I think that was last season too.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of understand why he's this hardened, makes the tough choice kind of character. And it makes sense. You do have to make these kind of morally gray, sometimes in the realm of evil decisions in order to ensure the safety of this planet. So I understand it to a point, but it's hard because it's, the thing that I hate most about it is them being worried that he's going to turn into Omni-Man, which is obviously Mark's biggest worry also. But I don't think he will ever get to that point. Anything he does, even if he does kill someone like he did in episode 1 of this season, he's doing for the greater good of the planet. So that's the only thing that makes me kind of angry, even though I understand they were, Omni-Man was there for 18 years or longer, maybe, until he turned. So that worry is always going to be in the back of your head of something that happens again. But also, Mark was born here. He grew up a human being. He didn't even know he was going to get powers. Then he did. He always hoped he would, but it was never a given thing that it would happen. So that's the only thing that I'm like, can't you just trust this guy? I mean, he has been on our side this whole time. He's gone to other planets for them and stuff like that. Like, yes, his existence has caused other problems for the world, but that's kind of not his fault for being born. It's hard. And that's what I love about the show. Complex scenarios and thoughts and emotions like that is what makes this show so great. So I understand it, but it still upsets me because I love Mark. Mark's the guy.
I mean, he's definitely the guy, but I think Cecil mentions this, or maybe I'm thinking of the comic, but I think Cecil's worried not necessarily that Mark will turn into Omni-Man, but he'll turn into something worse than Omni-Man. And he says, what does he say? Something along the lines of how, Mark has a unwavering conviction to do what he thinks is right. But the problem is Mark is not always right. So that's when we get terrible things like Conquest and Angstrom Levy. And while this is a good thing, I think Cecil recognizes that Mark unwilling to listen to anybody else when he thinks that he's doing the right thing is a very dangerous thing. Whereas Nolan was just 100% like, I am doing this because it, what I need to do. But Mark's indecisiveness, I think, for Cecil makes him a bit more dangerous. TJ, what did you think about, again, this dynamic between Mark and Cecil? And again, do you think that Cecil is genuinely concerned for Mark, or again, just he's so afraid of him, he just wants him on his side?
Yeah, I think he's more concerned for the planet than for Mark, but I don't think that doesn't mean that there's some empathy there. I think it's an important relationship because I honestly think they need each other. When they're talking, I think Cecil's right when he's saying to him, like, let me make that decision. If somebody needs to die, let me make that decision.
I love that line. I love that line.
And he's right, because it has to be Cecil. Why does it have to be Cecil? Because if Cecil goes too far, Mark can stop him. If Mark goes too far, no one can stop him. And so it has to be Cecil being the one making those decisions, because if Cecil goes too far, which we know he does, whether it be the Reaniman or Conquest, whatever, or Engstrom, whatever, what have you, we know he's always has the capacity to go too far. He's doing it because he thinks it's for the good of the planet, but he screws up sometimes. He's got to be the one in that position, though, because Mark's the one above him. Because Mark, if Cecil ever goes crazy, can shut what he's doing down, whereas the opposite is not true.
100%. That's such a great point, TJ, and you hit it absolutely on the head. Like, they really do need each other, and I love that line from Cecil where he's like, dude, I lost my humanity years ago. Let me do this, like, the messed up stuff. And I love too how this is for me, I think Cecil, the question I asked you guys, I think Cecil was being genuine, because when he says that, you're basically like, you're a good guy and I want you to stay that way. Like, I want you to stay the kid that you were when you first put on this costume. And again, just such great character work for Cecil. Again, kind of happens similar in the comics, but Cecil's very more confrontational about this whole thing, and is basically just like, yeah, you got to stop killing people. But I love how we get this genuine moment between both of them. And that brings us kind of to what I will mention really quickly. We talked about the parallels between Oliver and Mark. We get a really great section of this episode of Oliver and Mark fighting Mr. Lau in his dragon form, which just so fun. I don't know what song they had playing during that sequence, but it was awesome. It got me so hyped up. But I think, again, just a really great visual parallel between the two brothers, and showing how Oliver, like you were talking about, Sean, how this dynamic between them has kind of shifted. Oliver, straight up hero, and then Mark nearly kills Titan. He just starts beating the crap out of him because he put Oliver in danger, making good on his promise that he made to him, that he will not hesitate to kill anybody that threatens his family. So, Tom, what did you think? I mean, besides just the fun of the, punchy fighty fighting the dragon, what did you think of this, Mark once again almost crossing the line? And not only that, but Oliver being the one to stop him, when, again, we talked about Oliver was totally cool with killing villains last season.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. I think it's so interesting to see Mark going down this darker path. I progressively more as the episodes have gone on. And yeah, I think like it is interesting because, yeah, it goes back to the Cecil conversation too. It's like Mark is justified in a lot of the stuff that he does, but it's just the ways he's going about them right now is way above kind of what he's done before and what he should really be doing. So it should be it should be someone else's decision to be making those hard calls and that sort of thing. So kind of when you look at it and you present it as all the actions that Mark is doing as this kind of unregulated, extremely powerful hero that's kind of abusing his power in a lot of these ways, you can kind of see Cecil's perspective of oh yeah, maybe he should have a little bit of a leash on him. And yeah, it was kind of heartbreaking to see Oliver kind of motion for Mark to stop, because yeah, he can see what was going on last season and how yeah, going back to what we talked about before, the roles are reversed now. It's it shouldn't have to be this way where it's like the little brother is having to tell his big brother to stop beating a man to death, I guess. But that's how it is in the show, which is just like which is horrible, but it's such good like comparing and contrasting from those scenarios. So it just makes me scared for what Mark will potentially do for the rest of the show. I hope this is the last of it, but it's Invincible, so probably not. But no, really good stuff. I really like the stuff.
Who among us haven't had to have that conversation with our sibling?
Yeah,
I
true.
mean, seriously. I don't have siblings, but I would imagine that the conversation would go that way. Sean, you're the one who brought up this kind of dynamic flip between Oliver and Mark. And I think, again, this scene is the perfect example of that. So what did you think of, again, Mark kind of crossing this line and Oliver being the one to have to hold him back?
Well, obviously, this dude has caused Mark a lot of grief. Not saying he should kill him, but he definitely deserved a beating. I mean, because of him, he almost got beat to death because of Battle Beast. Just saying.
That is true. But I thought they were cool, though. They were like, I mean, they were pretty cool by the end of like last season. I think we saw him.
And then he almost got killed by a dragon. Again,
True.
Not great. Not saying he deserved to die, but I'm saying he deserved a little bit of a beating. Which I
don't disagree with. I was actually thinking that during this episode. I'm like, dude, Titan, every time he gets in like a little bit of trouble, he's just like, Invincible, can you help me? Like literally every time.
And it was really funny to see because obviously Mark was dealing with what's the weird alien race that keeps coming back. What's the name?
Flaxons.
The Flaxons. Yeah, he was dealing with the Flaxons. I was going
to get to the Flaxons right after.
Yeah. So they had to send Oliver. And that was really fun where he's like floating outside the high-rise window being like, is this the place? That was amazing. That was great. And it was cool to see Oliver not only take on that responsibility to try and help Mark and Eve, but the fact that when he got in over his head, he called them and was like, I need help. That shows growth.
Ooh.
And I love that. That's a big thing. He knew he was in over his head. He did not try to take it on by himself, which was a problem last season, obviously. And it was very cool to see him. That's a very adult thing to do, to admit, hey, I need some backup here, guys. Mm-hmm. We need to. This is too much for me. This big crazy dragon, a little too much for me to handle. So it's really cool. But yeah, it's again, it's teetering on that line of like, Mark, what are you doing, buddy? And again, this is a different point than the end of episode 1, where killing Titan isn't going to. Obviously, he's like a criminal in a big, and at the end of this episode, in a big crime organization that's very evil, but it's not an exact threat to the world as a whole. At least at this point, at this very moment, the world wasn't going to end if he let him live. So I think that's the line we need to set here. You know,
yeah,
he's not an Angstrom. He's not a Conquest. He's just kind of like a city villain, I guess. You know,
I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, it is about that immediacy. Not every superhero is Spider-Man or Superman or Batman, where they have a no-kill rule. Some are Captain America, Iron Man, Wolverine, where if this person's about to kill somebody else, they're dead. I'm going to take them out immediately. But it's about that immediacy. It has to be, there is a threat right now to someone, the world, whatever it is, to take that action, because otherwise it's just murder.
Yep. TJ nailed 100%. It there.
You both nailed it. You guys are good at this whole podcasting, analyzing TV thing. It's like you guys have done it before.
Man, like, for real, I really appreciate you being the host for this one, because like I don't have a problem with hosting shows, but I genuinely feel like my ability to critique and analyze the stuff we're talking about is just nowhere near as good as when I'm not hosting, because I'm so focused on like the flow and making sure we're moving forward and sticking to what we're supposed to be sticking to. But when I get to just like respond to questions, it's a lot more fun to actually be like, to think critically and analyze because I feel like I have the capacity to do it. So yeah, thank you for being the main man here.
Of course, of course. Like I said, me and Sean started this a good couple years ago now, and I love doing this show. It's the first time I actually hosted a show in a while, so I appreciate those words, TJ. I was a little nervous, but Sean, you brought this up, or maybe TJ, you brought it up. The Flaxons, those freaky little dimensional aliens that age in like 30 days. They return, of course, because they return every season. But kind of main thing to talk about right here is Robot and Monster Girl. We're kind of left with the cliffhanger of Robot and Monster Girl get stuck in their dimension after they go in trying to stop them once and for all. So Tom, I'll throw it to you. I'm not going to spoil anything, and obviously it's left vague of what will happen to them. But do you got any thoughts on where we might see Monster Girl and Robot pop up next? And also, do you think Robot made the right call?
Yeah, it's interesting with Robot. That's one of the things, I haven't really mentioned yet, but I think because I've heard some things about where the show's heading with Robot, and there's kind of seeds that I can see the seeds that they're planting with his character. So it's really interesting to see like he's kind of making these brash calls and kind of going against the grain, which seems kind of like unlike him in a lot of ways. So that's really cool. I think probably ultimately made the right call, but it remains to be seen. Like, I don't know, maybe the fact that they are stuck there now, that will lead to like just an even worse kind of outcome for Earth. But no, I think because I was going back, I was like, we saw the Flaxons here. I was like, I obviously recognize these guys. Well, and they mentioned like, when Omni-Man was there. So my memory of season 1 was kind of hazy. I was like, surely it could have been that bad what Omni-Man did to them, right? And I watched the scene from season 1.
Man.
Where they just decimate everything.
Vaporize them.
Yeah, Nolan was pretty bad to them, I guess. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see like what they kind of do to get out of that situation. I think like Nolan kind of forces some scientists to kind of open a portal back for him, and that's how he gets back. And so maybe kind of similar situations, like the only way to get back is through the Flaxons kind of aiding them in some way. I don't really know what. Maybe there's some diplomatic situation to this. I don't know. I don't know what Robot's got up his sleeve, but I think it's really fascinating. Like, he's kind of loose off in a similar way to Invincible, but in a different way. He's kind of loose off the chain of like he's just kind of doing his own thing, and sometimes it's working out, sometimes it's not. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, he's a loose cannon. And you bring up a really great point that I was going to mention, but we had to, skim through a couple things. But we saw like Robot is kind of, like you said, going against the grain a little bit. He had a little words to say to both Cecil and Britt after Britt got the new lead of the Guardians. And we also saw he has a little moment with Monster Girl where he starts to see Mark's new train of thought. And he's like, no matter what we do, these villains just keep coming back. Like, it doesn't matter what we do. We're always just back in the same shit. So, Sean, adding on to all that, like I said, what do you think of Robot / Rex kind of, again, becoming this loose cannon and their decision to, like I said, stay in the Flaxon dimension?
It's a great example of how villains keep coming back and the stakes get higher. Because what is worse than two guardians getting trapped in a dimension they have no way of getting to? And that was even such a great thing. The portal closes, Cecil comes, and they're like, "Can't you just open another portal?" And he's like, "Don't you think we've been trying that since the first time they came?" And I was like, "Oof, that's wild." And a thing I think we might be forgetting, when Nolan went there, he aged like years because time works differently there. Time works much faster there than it does on Earth. Hence why they die when they come to Earth. They just die.
Good thing they're both children.
I know.
Yeah, true.
But it's like,
that's a good point.
Is that that's what I was thinking. Like, is it going to affect them? Because Monster Girl's like abilities have made her younger, and then obviously Rex found out the loophole to keep her at the same age at least, and he is like a weird clone. Does that clone age? I don't know. I guess we'll find out.
They need to reverse that Monster Girl thing that they fixed ASAP, so she can just like age at a normal pace now while on that planet.
Yeah, Monster Girl's aging is already screwed up. So.
Yeah.
That's why I'm wondering, like, when they do eventually return, do they get aged up when they come back? Like, is there a big age up? which is
Mhm.
that's a
That's
very
cool.
interesting story device, and that's something really cool. And again, it's another thing that leaves Earth at a disadvantage, losing two great heroes. Like obviously, even though Robot is kind of a loose cannon and does whatever he wants, like he is a very big mind for them to have,
Oh yeah.
and a very big resource for that team. Not only the team, the world. You know what I mean? Like he's one of the smartest guys probably on the planet, I would imagine.
Mhm.
You know, so that's a big loss. That's a big loss for Earth to take, and there's seemingly no real, like Tom said, yeah, maybe they get them to open a new portal for them, but it seemed like their mission to stay was to get rid of them once and for all. Again, that line of making sure these guys don't come back. And he saw something which I don't think they showed us, right? He saw something where he's like, if we don't take care of them now, they'll just keep coming back, and the next time they come back, it's going to be the worst thing. So we don't even know what that is. It'd be
Mhm.
cool if we get kind of like, maybe not a full episode, but like a section of an episode that like takes place in that dimension eventually, where you see like what's happening with them and what that thing is, because it's a pretty big thing to leave out. You're like, obviously he was very thrown by whatever he saw, so it has to be something very important. So very cool. Like again, it's just like in hindsight of everything that happens in Invincible, it can feel like a small thing, but I feel like that's such a big deal to
Mhm.
have those two trapped in that dimension. It's something you can forget about easily because the show moves
Yeah.
so fast and there's so much going on. But it's a great thing when it comes back, you'll be like, oh yeah, oh my god. And that's what the show does best, is the thing you're expecting, a million other things come at that you aren't expecting, that you're like, oh yeah, I forgot that was happening. So really cool thing to set up for whatever comes next with them.
I think one of my favorite parts of Invincible, probably the best part of Invincible, is how it takes all of these common comic book and superhero tropes and relationships and character arcs and character, what's the word I'm looking for, of just like baselines, and just completely changing what we're used to seeing. And it goes straight to the basis of the story. What if we take Superman, but we make him evil? Bam, Omni-Man. What if we make his kid basically Spider-Man in terms of personality, but he has Superman powers and the world is way darker and more evil? The whole Brit and robot dynamic is very Captain America and Iron Man.
For
It's
sure.
Captain America on the Brit side, where they are very moral, but they don't always have the ability to think outside of the perspective that they have. You know, when they're locked into a perspective, you're not going to convince them otherwise. Iron Man, you know, he's going to think through all the possible outcomes, and he's smarter. He's going to tell you the truth. He's going to make sure that we're doing the most efficient and the outcome that is going to eliminate the most possible harm down the line. But it can be heartless. It can be very, very heartless and not consider the immediate impact to emotionally to all of those around us. And sometimes bites off a little bit more than he can chew, because with great intelligence also comes great arrogance. And so they kind of have that dynamic between the two of them, where they're both right about some stuff, but because they're such polar opposites, they have tough time finding a middle ground.
That's a really great parallel, TJ, that I haven't really thought about. But I mean, you're right on the money there. I mean, that's kind of Robot's whole deal, right? Is he's so smart, but like sometimes he doesn't see the other sides of these pictures. Which I'm not going to spoil anything, but we will meet back up with Monster Girl and Robot eventually. But who knows when that's going to happen? But the one last thing I will mention is the Thraxan dimension. Tom, you were mentioning when Omni-Man went there. Not sure if they say this in the show, but in the book, they say like that all took place over like 100-something years in Flaxan time. And in the show, we see that Omni-Man still makes it home for dinner with Mark and Debbie. So that kind of gives you an idea of how drastic this time dilation is. So like I said, I won't spoil anything, but like you guys said, it is a massive thread that they can pick up pretty much any time that they want. And I'm so interested to see how they're going to loop that back around. But that brings us really to the end of the episode, except for one last big reveal, which I'm not going to really say anything about, because I feel like there's nothing to say without getting into like major spoilers for further down the line. So I guess just your reactions, but we get the drop at the end that Eve is pregnant, which is why all of her powers, all of her constructs have been turning to rainbow slush since last season. So what, again, I just like, what were you guys shocked by that? Do you have any, theories on what that could mean moving forward? Tom, I'll throw it off to you first.
Yeah, I think. Well, I'd heard kind of rumblings of like this might have been a possibility because her powers were on the fritz. So I when I saw that, I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense based on what I'd heard. But it is kind of a shocking revelation. It's also shocking that like she goes to Robot and they do all those kind of like tests on her, and he doesn't pick that up. I guess on his fancy.
That should be the like first thing you notice.
Honestly, like I don't know. He's a smart guy, but maybe he's not that smart. I guess what I'm saying.
That's kind of dumb, actually.
He's such a kind of a dumb guy. But no, I think it's really fascinating. I think like I don't know where the comic goes past this point. In terms of like whether they have the kid, like what that means in terms of like the Viltrumite like kind of legacy is continuing in that way, potentially. If it is Mark's kid, I mean. We can assume probably it is, but
whoa, man, whoa!
It's not.
Are you throwing shade at Eve here? TJ's about to go nuts.
Whoa!
I mean, she was with Rex.
I'm just kidding. I deleted them out for a second.
I literally was like, "Wait, what happened?"
I thought my internet went or something. I was like, "Oh
no!" You be careful what you say, Tom.
I'm laying out. This is the stuff we know, and we don't know certain things at this current time. I'm hoping it's for Mark's sake. He's our boy. I hope it's all on the up and up. But no, I think it's interesting. I'll be interested to see like whether this actually happens and whether Mark has to grapple with being a father at like you guys are saying, like 20 years old at this point, and being like a nuclear bomb kind of superhero. Yes, it's fascinating stuff. I think it's going to be really interesting to see where this kind of goes throughout the rest of the season and the rest of the show.
I just can't wait to find out about the baby, assuming that everything goes well with the pregnancy and they do actually have a kid. And I remember seeing in comics that we get like it being a specific joke within the future comics of like Eve gets a little bit thicker, her body type changes, and then Mark is like, hell yeah, I'm in. And I always thought that panel was just so funny. And so to me, having a baby kind of is like, all right, that's the route we're going on here. We're going to get a little change. And I just want to find out about what their baby is going to be, because it's like you put a Sue Storm and a Reed Richards together, you get the most powerful being in the entirety of the Marvel universe. What happens if you pair a Viltrumite with a human? You apparently get almost just a Viltrumite. Maybe they're not quite as strong, but pretty much just the Viltrumite. What happens if you pair a Viltrumite with the most
Scarlet
powerful
Witch
human, a super witch, like the most powerful non-Viltrumite being, maybe just the most powerful being that we've met so far? So that's really cool. To me, the concept of like, what if we get a baby who's a Viltrumite with super witch powers? Come on.
What more could you ask for, right?
Yeah.
Sean, any thoughts on Eve and Mark's super baby?
Yeah, I mean, I guess knowing some things from the comics, her being pregnant didn't exactly surprise me, but it happening now was surprising. Obviously, it's kind of like, I guess they always say that, when you're young and you get pregnant, it's like the worst time. Obviously, having a kid is like a gift and a miracle, but with so much going on, is this really a good time for Mark to have a kid? I don't know, but we'll see where that goes. We'll cross that road once we get to it.
Yeah, I mean, we have so many pieces flying around right now.
Yeah.
Who knows when we'll get to that?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But that brings us to the end of the 3-episode premiere. I know we went through a lot of stuff here today. Thank you all for tuning in with us and hanging out with us. Shout out to Jam, Richie, Mardun, Yeezy in the chat. Thank you all for tuning in. TJ, why don't you let the people know what else we got coming and take us on out?
Make sure you're following us on socials, on YouTube, and on the podcast feed so that you don't miss out what we got coming. Either Thursday or Friday, TBD, we will be doing our Spider-Man Brand New Day trailer breakdown. Sunday, we're going to be reviewing and going fully deep diving into Project Hail Mary. Myself, Adam Blevins, my former co-host, making his return to the pod. You want me to talk about that one, as well as Emma and Jamie Zwarych. The next week, Monday, Paradise. Me, Jam, and Ryan talking about some Paradise. Tuesday, Daredevil Born Again. Wednesday, Invincible. We're back. Thursday, Comic Corner. Friday, who knows, but we'll have something for you. No days off. We got content coming every single day, so make sure you stay tuned.
Beautiful, beautiful, Tom. Thank you once again for joining us. It was an absolute pleasure having you on. Everyone out there, thank you once again for tuning in, and you can catch us next week for another episode of Beyond Invincible.